The focus shifts to a tight close-up of her ear and temple, where the physical heat of her arousal is most visible. Her skin is stained with a deep, radiant pink, and the fine lines of the illustration depict the rushing blood and the heat she feels. Her long, dark hair cascades around her face, framing the elegant pearl and gold floral earring that dangles as she moves. This panel captures the internal sensory overload, the sound of her own heartbeat thumping in her ears. The camera zooms in on the physical contact, emphasizing the raw power of the interaction. His pale hand wraps tightly around her thigh, the fingers pressing into her skin with a firm, possessive grab. The contrast between his strong, steady hand and the softness of her skin highlights the dominance of his movement. The fabric of his dark trousers and the sharp lines of the artwork underscore the suddenness and the intensity of this physical claim. The atmosphere in the room thickens with a heavy, palpable tension. The man, dressed in a crisp white shirt with the top buttons undone, leans forward with a look of intense, focused desire. His dark hair falls slightly over his brow, shadowing eyes that are fixed intently on the woman before him. There is a slight flush across his cheekbones, betraying the heat of the moment. One of his hands firmly grips her leg, pulling her closer into his personal space, signaling a moment where words are no longer necessary and actions take over. The perspective returns to the man, focusing on the lower half of his face as he hovers inches away. Beads of sweat trail down his neck, reflecting the physical exertion of his self-control. His jaw is set, and his mouth is slightly open as he draws in a sharp, ragged breath. The proximity is electric. He is so close that his breath likely brushes against her skin. The focus on his lips and the tension in his neck emphasizes the primal, intoxicating nature of the desire he is struggling to contain. Overwhelmed by the sudden contact, the woman lies back, her body reacting instinctively to his touch. A twitch ripples through her as her heart races. Her hand reflexively clutches the fabric of her dress at her chest, a gesture of both vulnerability and rising excitement. A soft blush creeps up her neck to her face, and her lips part slightly as a quiet gasp escapes her. She is caught in a whirlwind of emotion, her body trembling under the weight of his gaze and his touch. The scene begins with a moment of high tension and uncertainty. A hand tightly clenches the white fabric of a bedsheet, the knuckles straining with the force of the grip. A faint pink blush creeps across the skin, and a small bead of sweat suggests a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. Above, a shaky speech bubble escapes. "Wait!" It is a plea for a momentary pause, capturing the sudden rush of overwhelming emotion. The perspective shifts to the dark-haired man, his head bowed as he moves closer. He appears focused, his presence heavy and deliberate. The other person, caught off guard by his sudden proximity and the intensity of the atmosphere, stammers out a confused question. "What are you doing?" The air is thick with the unspoken as the boundaries between them begin to blur. As he leans in further, the man's features are revealed in sharp detail. His dark, neatly styled hair falls slightly over his brow, which is damp with perspiration. His eyes are narrowed, filled with a deep, smoldering intensity as he looks up from his position. He holds a leg firmly but carefully, his touch grounding them both in the reality of the moment. The flush on his cheeks mirrors the heat of the room. The focus tightens into a dramatic close-up of his eye. The iris is a cool, dark violet, shimmering with a predatory yet focused resolve. The slight redness around his eyelids and the blush on his skin emphasize his state of arousal and determination. In response to the earlier hesitation, he utters a short, breathless promise that carries a weight of its own. "You'll see." It is an answer that offers no escape, only a deepening of the encounter. Finally, the tension breaks into action. The man dives forward, his head disappearing into the fold of the moment as he follows through on his intent. The sound effect, rustle, vibrates across the panel, signifying the movement of fabric and bodies. His hand remains a steady anchor, fingers splayed against skin, as he fully commits to the intimacy of the act, leaving words behind for the sensation of the present. As the intensity of the moment escalates, the woman is visibly startled by the sheer novelty of the sensation. Her eyes go wide with realization, and she instinctively brings both hands to her face, muffling a gasp as a deep crimson blush spreads across her cheeks. Her long, wavy hair fans out across the pillow, framing a face caught in the throes of a sudden, overwhelming physical awakening. Body trembling, she let out a weak, breathy plea. "Stop!" Despite her verbal protests, her body betrayed her as it began to twitch uncontrollably against the sheets. The fabric of her dress bunched and wrinkled under the strain of her shifting movements, illustrating the internal conflict between her startled mind and her reacting body. In contrast to her chaotic reaction, the man remained deeply immersed in the act. A close-up of his face shows his brow furrowed with concentration and a light sheen of sweat. His eyes were half-lidded and heavy with desire, yet there was a gentleness in his expression as he witnessed her reaction. The flush on his own face mirrored hers, showing that he was just as affected by the intimacy as she was. The sensation reached a fever pitch, causing her to flinch as her legs stiffened and her toes curled against the bed. Her mind raced to make sense of the pleasure that was flooding her system, leading to a dazed internal monologue. "I've never felt like this before." The physical contact between his dark-trousered legs and her bare skin created a sharp visual contrast, highlighting the vulnerability of her position. Finally, as the waves of feeling continued to wash over her, her toes remained tightly gripped, the skin flushed a deep pink from the rush of blood. The sheer intensity of the experience left her in a state of shock, her thoughts trailing off into a whisper of pure disbelief. How can this be? The world outside the room had ceased to exist, leaving only the profound and terrifyingly beautiful discovery of a sensation she never knew existed. She lies back against the pillows, her long, wavy auburn hair fanning out around her. Her face is flushed with a deep crimson blush that reaches her ears, and small beads of sweat glisten on her skin. Her eyes are misty, reflecting a mix of exhaustion and intense sensation. With a heavy huff of breath, she trembles and manages to whisper a desperate request. "Please, just stop now." The camera shifts to a close-up of her torso, draped in a delicate, light-colored fabric that clings to her form. The atmosphere is charged with a shimmering, ethereal glow. The internal pressure she feels is becoming unbearable, manifesting as a thought that screams louder than any words spoken aloud. "I feel like my body's going to explode." It is a moment of pure sensory overload. The tension reaches its peak as the proximity between them closes. Every small movement feels magnified in the quiet room. The speaker leans in further, their presence overwhelming her senses. With a final, lingering note of doubt and curiosity, the question is repeated, softer this time, hanging in the air like a dare. Really? A hand reaches out, the touch described as gentle as it grazes the fabric of her attire. The movements are slow, deliberate, and teasingly soft. A voice cuts through her haze, low and questioning, challenging her earlier plea. The speaker isn't convinced by her words, asking with a hint of playful provocation, "Do you really want me to stop?" The air in the room feels thick with an unspoken electricity. The woman, her face partially obscured, clenches her hand tightly against her chest, her knuckles turning white. The sound of a sharp clench echoes her internal struggle. She is overwhelmed, her breathing shallow as she utters a faint, uncertain, caught between the surge of her emotions and the reality of the moment. A cold, knowing smirk plays across the man's lips as he looks down at her. He is undeterred by her pleas, his expression radiating a sense of absolute control. Beads of perspiration roll down his neck, yet his composure remains unshaken. He watches her struggle with a predatory gaze, clearly enjoying the effect he has on her. With a sudden, decisive motion, his hand reaches for his collar. A sharp pop echoes through the room as a button is forced open, signaling the end of his restraint. As he begins to loosen his attire, he reminds her of his nature with a low, chilling declaration. A prosecutor. The unyielding nature. He rises over her, his presence looming larger and more intimidating than before. His eyes are fixed on hers, dark and intense. He lets out a heavy ha of breath, his face flushed with the same heat that has consumed the room. He continues his sentence, his voice dripping with authority. Never take someone at their word. He sheds his shirt completely, revealing a powerful, well-defined physique. Every muscle is taut and primed for action, a physical manifestation of his refusal to back down. The white fabric of his shirt hangs loosely from his hands as he prepares to move forward, leaving no room for further negotiation or escape. The demand for evidence. The woman can only watch, breathless and wide-eyed, letting out a soft "huh" as she sinks further into the pillows. Her face is a mask of heat and submission. The man's final words hang over her like a sentence passed in court, cold and immutable. They only believe in the evidence. To him, her words of protest mean nothing compared to the physical reaction he sees before him. The woman lies back against the soft pillows, her long, wavy mahogany hair spreading out around her like a silken fan. A deep, feverish flush has taken over her cheeks, and her eyes are heavy, glazed with a mixture of exhaustion and overwhelming emotion. She clutches her hand tightly against her chest, her knuckles pale as she tries to steady the frantic rhythm of her heart. Beads of cold sweat roll down her neck, and her lips are parted slightly, struggling to find a steady breath in the heat of the moment. The air in the room feels thick and heavy. A sharp, audible huff escapes her as her body trembles from the exertion. In the midst of her clouded senses, a moment of sudden clarity strikes her like a bolt of lightning. The internal chaos settles into a singular, jarring thought as she murmurs to herself in a jagged breath, "Oh, I see." The realization is both startling and inevitable, anchoring her back to a reality she wasn't prepared to face. Driven by an instinct she can no longer suppress, she lifts her hand toward the dim light of the city skyline visible through the window. Her fingers are slender and pale, trembling slightly as they stretch upward, silhouetted against the purple hue of the night. The word reach hangs in the air, echoing her desperate physical and emotional longing. She is grasping for something or someone just out of her current touch, her hand a symbol of a silent plea for connection in the quiet room. The world around her seems to tunnel vision, everything fading into a white void except for the racing thoughts in her mind. Within a jagged, vibrating speech bubble that mirrors her unstable heartbeat, a single word lingers, unfinished. I. It is a confession caught in her throat, a truth so heavy that she cannot yet find the strength to voice it completely. The silence that follows is deafening, filled with the weight of everything left unsaid. The man hovers close, his face partially shielded by the shadow of his dark tousled hair. His expression is a masterclass in restrained emotion. His eyes are downcast, yet they burn with a quiet, simmering intensity that matches the flush spreading across his own features. Every breath he takes is deliberate, heavy with the weight of the moment, as he looks down at her with a mixture of profound tenderness and undeniable hunger. The city lights outside create a soft bokeh glow behind him, isolating the two of them in a world where nothing else exists but this shared electric proximity. The internal struggle finally reaches its breaking point, giving way to a powerful, singular clarity. Within a large, jagged speech bubble that pulses with the same frantic energy as her heart, her truest desire is finally laid bare. I want this man too. No longer a half-formed thought or a hesitant I. This is a definitive surrender to her own feelings. The dark atmospheric background of the room emphasizes the gravity of this mental vow, marking the moment her resistance completely dissolves into a yearning that matches his own. All hesitation vanishes as they are drawn together like two celestial bodies in an inescapable orbit. The man leans over her, his powerful frame casting a shadow across her smaller form as she lies beneath him, her long hair spilling across the sheets. Her hands, which were once clutching her own chest in uncertainty, now reach up to grasp his shoulders, pulling him closer as their gazes lock in a moment of absolute mutual recognition. The tension in the room is palpable, a silent conversation of touch and breath that confirms their shared desire, transforming the quiet night into a scene of intense, intimate connection.